Okay, everyone, welcome back to Pastor. This is episode 9. I have my longtime good friend, George Wright, today, who knew me when I was an 18-year-old. Can you believe that? So, George, you want to talk a little bit about where you're doing ministry and a little bit about your calling?
Well, absolutely, Charlie. I do appreciate this opportunity. And yes, it's great to have a conversation around ministry, but it really is get caught up and just connect with a friend. So I appreciate it. I pastor Shandon Baptist Church in Columbia, South Carolina. We're right on the edge of being in town. So in town, Columbia, and I've been here a little over 3 years. Easter was our 3-year anniversary since I've become senior pastor here.
Awesome. Okay, and so George is from the little town of Atlanta, right?
That's right. Sleepy little southern small town.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Little Atlanta, right? That everybody thinks that. And then you came to Carolina because your dad had gone to Carolinas, right? And so you came to.
Well, it's actually far more than that. So I grew up a Carolina fan, but it wasn't just my dad. When I got to USC, I was the 19th member of my family.
That's right.
Go to South Carolina. So long family tradition, and I'm the oldest of my cousins and siblings and everybody. So I was the first of that next generation to go to Carolina, and I think we're close to about 30 now that have gone to Carolina.
Now, where your father was from South Carolina originally?
No, so it's interesting. I didn't know all this growing up. I found out actually in college some of this. But so my grandfather, who I'm named for, George Sr., he grew up in Atlanta, went to South Carolina. He's who started the tradition. He met a lovely young lady from Columbia, and they got married and moved back to Atlanta. Then my dad, who I'm also named for, he's George Bryant Wright Jr., grew up in Atlanta, went to Columbia, married a beautiful young lady from Columbia, and moved back to Atlanta. And then myself grew up in Atlanta and met a beautiful young lady from Columbia and moved back to Atlanta for a big stretch of our marriage. So, and now we're back in South Carolina, and we do love being back, not only in Columbia, but in the state. I mean, we love the state of South Carolina and love the university. And it's such a privilege to get to do ministry right here in the capital city, but also in the university city that we love so much. It's been a great joy for us.
Awesome. So Columbia's my hometown. I was born and raised there, went to Carolina and everything. And I haven't really, I did come back for several years. I was on staff at a church, First Baptist, for a few years before I got the call to preach. And been preaching now for over 10 years, but I'm from Columbia. And so now when I had moved and come back, not a lot had changed, but it is a unique city. It's a capital city. It's a college town. It's a great place to live. I love it. Of course, there's all kind of things to do. So talk a little bit about Columbia's reality, and then what it's like to actually minister in Columbia.
Sure.
Because it's a very complicated ministry field.
It is. Yeah, there's no question about it. And Columbia has changed. You talk about growing up here and it not changing a whole lot. And that certainly was the story for a long time. But man, in the last 10 years, this is a different city. It's very different than when I was here as a college student, graduated 2001. So, that 20-year stretch, basically, there has been tremendous change. And the vibrancy of the downtown community is really incredible, all that's happened there. But you've got a lot of racial tension that is a reality in Columbia. You've got a ton of economic tension in town. You've got some booming suburbs, around the city, but right here where we are in town, you've got a real disparity in the way a lot of people live. And Columbia is somewhat unique in that those disparities can literally be side by side, one street after another. And so it's not like you got this one section that, is all this affluence, and then over this section is all this struggle and poverty. It's all intermingling, which is just really interesting in the dynamics of the city. But it gives us as a church this beautiful opportunity to really love our neighbors and love our neighborhood in a way that can reflect, hopefully, a beautiful picture of the body of Christ, that we're not all the same. And it challenges the body of Christ to reach across the aisle and love neighbors that may not look like them or live like them. And in a lot of ways, that's a beautiful gift.
Yeah. Awesome, awesome. You talked about how y'all have a pretty good ministry to college students, and of course, I enjoyed being a part of Shandon as a youth group. That's my home church, and then went right into the college ministry. Not a lot of churches have that did that. How has the college ministry aspect, or just the college student at USC, changed since when we were college students? I know some of it's generational, but just maybe even at Carolina, how it's changed a little bit. Have you seen?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I would say two things about this Carolina specifically, but I also think just collegiate ministry right now, generically.
Yeah.
College students, man, it's really the greatest mission field sending opportunity probably in our culture right now. And at the same time, I would say it's one of the greatest areas of attack in our culture. And it certainly would make sense that that would be the case, that there's this beautiful opportunity to raise up a generation and send them out as it relates to the mission. And yet the enemy knows that. And so the enemy is on the prowl at the university. And so I would say even from when you and I were there, I mean, you know, we saw the good, the bad, and the ugly. We had some great Christian fellowship. We also had, you know, plenty of opportunities to go
Yeah.
to what was dark. I mean, that's always there on the college campus. But I would say right now, especially here at Carolina, there is a spiritual oppression that is very real. And I think it being kind of the flagship university for the state and intertwined with the politics of the state and just the agenda that's often being pushed at a secular university.
Mhm.
It really can be a challenge for kids who are seeking to live their faith and follow the Lord. But at the same time, those who are seeking to live their faith and follow the Lord have this vitality and this vibrancy and this passion because you really have to. I mean, I think what we're seeing on the university campus is cultural Christianity is just ceasing to exist. And I
Yeah.
think that's happening culturally at large, but it's magnified at the university. And so we've got this group of kids, man, that they are passionate about the gospel. They are passionate about the mission. And it's really exciting to be involved in that and seeing the way God is using these students to really make an impact.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. The pressures of college is interesting. Um, I remember when I took my English 102 class, and even back in the 90s, I didn't know what this was, but English 102 was like our textbook was essentially how to reinterpret the text to whatever you wanted to mean. I
Right.
mean, it really was. And
Yeah.
I remember sitting around in a small group in English 102, and literally, and I didn't know it at the time, but what I was doing was I was making fun of it. We would sit around in a small group of like 20 people in our little class, and we read the thing, and then literally the teacher said, "All right, everybody, what did you get from this story?"
Yeah.
And I had a friend of mine in there, and we kind of were like goofing off, and I was like, "Well," and I would make something up, and he would be like, "Yeah, that's right, that's good." Like there was no wrong answer,
Speaks to my heart.
right? And that was
Yeah.
over
Yeah.
20 years ago, so I can only imagine what it's like now, right?
Well, and I'll tell you what we have seen in my 3 years of being here that I do think is different than when you and I were students at Carolina involved in Shannon's college ministry. A lot of the kids that were in college ministry, at least in my experience, were kids that had grown up in the church.
Mm.
And we still see plenty of that. But what we're seeing is more and more kids that really are active and passionate and devoted in our college ministry. They are first generation believers.
Oh
And
wow.
that's exciting. And so they have experienced a dramatic life change. They have experienced in a very real way the power of the gospel. And so they are on fire and they want to make an impact. They want to live this mission. And so that's been, in a lot of ways, it's kind of a frontier missions experience on the college campus right now, right here in our own backyard. And so we're trying to treat it that way. We're trying to view the college campus through a post-Christian lens and do everything we can to be actively engaged as quote unquote missionaries
Yeah.
to the college campus. And we're using that language with the students, and they really seem to be grabbing a hold of that. Like, we're not just trying to go gather a bunch of Christian kids.
Yeah.
We love to connect with Christian kids, don't get me wrong, but we're trying to go reach this campus. And there is a tremendous opportunity when you have 30,000 students from all over the place. and Carolina's grown in its diversity. It's grown in where people come from as far as regions of the country. I mean, I think we're at the point now where the out-of-state kids are a higher percentage than the in-state kids. That's very different than when you and I were college students. And so what that does is it gives you the chance to really be reaching some people from outside the South, from outside the Bible Belt, knowing that they'll probably go back home and they can go be missionaries back where they came from in the Northeast or wherever it may be. And man, that's a really exciting opportunity. So we just talk sending all the time. We talk mission all the time. And our students really have grabbed a hold of that.
That's really interesting. Yeah, because I remember my freshman year when I was in the old towers that were knocked down.
Yeah, thank the Lord.
What is there now? What building is at the towers?
Yeah, so they just have redone dorms that are super nice. And in fact, I think one of the dorms right there where the towers were is an honors college dorm. It's incredibly nice. So, I mean,
very similar to what I was living in.
Yeah, I mean, we can kind of joke about it, and I think about when my dad was at Carolina, how much it's changed, but it is so nice on campus. The construction they've done, and I mean, it's just incredible.
I remember when I was on that my freshman floor there, going back to the diversity. You're right. Everybody was from two places on that floor. They were from South Carolina and New Jersey.
Yes, there you go.
That was all. For some reason, people from New Jersey just kept coming down. I don't know why.
That's right. That's
really cool that we've operated out more out of those two states. That's good. But talk a little bit about then a little bit more about Columbia. Some of the challenges you see just in general, not even like you mentioned some of the politics and stuff, but because obviously when you are in the city is filled with politicians, literally, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So how does that, what are some ministry challenges you've seen with that a little bit?
Yeah, especially in today's climate, it's so polarizing. And so what we're trying to navigate is the language that we use, because we want to be involved in the conversation, and we want to be a people that is a change agent in this city, and we want to be engaged. But the reality is, if you start to side with certain political aspirations or movements, or you start to use certain political language, you've already caused a large group of people to just tone you out altogether.
That's right.
And so we are trying to be very wise in the language that we use. We're trying to be very gospel centered and very grounded in the Word of God. And we want our political conversations to be gospel conversations. And so that's a challenge. There are times when you stumble and fall in that, when you want to be involved. I think it's a total mistake to just pull away from it altogether. But I also think it's a total mistake to try and choose a political party or a politician to stand with and say, this is the Jesus guy. I mean, we need to stand on the scripture, and we need to stand on what the gospel reveals. And we need to be comfortable with the fact that there's going to be tension in these conversations. And there are going to be people that we're seeking to reach and disciple that are on both sides of some of these political conversations. And what matters most is that the kingdom of God is advancing through the people of God, not that a certain political party is advancing through the people of God. And so we just try to talk through that as much as we can. And man, use as much grace as possible and be as humble as possible, because again, it is polarizing and it is very charged when you enter into some of these conversations. And I will say this, Charles, the last thing I'd say, it is always striking to me when some of these political conversations come up and you realize that some people who say they are followers of Jesus are far more passionate about their political persuasion than they are about the gospel advancing and the kingdom of God growing. And so that's why we want the gospel to be leading the conversation, is because we want to say, no, if you're a follower of Christ, man, you are called to something higher than this political persuasion or this political party that you align with. You're called to something greater than this political conversation. And so challenges will always be there, but man, I'm grateful that we get to step into that and be involved, because I really do think the church can be a tremendous gift in a city if the church is seeking to be as wise or as shrewd as a serpent, as the scripture says, but as crafty, or as innocent, excuse me, as innocent as a dove. And it's a hard balance, but I just think it's something that we're called to.
I like that about choosing the language, because it's very easy to be using political language on either side to point to your biblical stance. And it's very easy to do that. And a lot of times, I'm not sure pastors, leaders know that maybe they're using political talking points.
That's right.
And where does it come from? Like, where does this come from? Where does this come from here? And so I like the idea of using language, creating language that means something, but still you're pulling it out of scripture. You're not necessarily taking it from somewhere and saying, all right, how does this work in scripture? Of course, right. Which is eisegesis, which we're not supposed to be doing anyway. So right. Very good. That's great.
Well, and that language is just so charged. And the way I've talked about it a few times is when I was a kid, my dad tells this story, but I was in the dining room holding a screwdriver, and I walked over and did, the dumbest thing you possibly do. I put the screwdriver in the electrical socket. And so I shot across the room, and my hair, standing up, and thankfully nothing serious. So, well, maybe it was serious. Maybe you're dealing with the repercussions today. Yeah. This is what happened to me. I stuck a screwdriver in an electric socket as a kid. But the point is, when something is charged, it's going to be explosive.
Yeah.
Unless you walk in wisdom and you walk in humility and you seek to guard the things you say for the sake of someone actually being able to listen instead of just trying to speak to make a point.
Yeah.
And I think where we often miss it, especially in these political conversations as followers of Christ, is we're always trying to make a point. We're always trying to push something hard. And all we're doing is we're sticking a screwdriver into something that's charged. It's just going to create an explosion. And if we'd be willing to do what the scripture says, be quick to listen and slow to speak, and to really guard the words that we say, and to speak, to try to speak in a way that it can actually be heard, it would change the whole conversation as it relates to the church.
It's good. So don't not speak, but choose when to speak and how to do it. Very good.
That's right.
Awesome. Let's talk a little bit about following a long-time pastor. Dr. Lincoln was there over 40 years, and I was a baby. Well, I guess I technically wasn't. Well, he was there before I was born, actually. But we came. I think we came when I was like a toddler. Anyway, that was baptized and Shandon and everything. But there for so many years, and you knew him personally as a friend as well. So some of the advice, and you can speak from experiences, no matter where you speak from, or just in general principles, but some advice about a guy that's coming in that maybe the pastor's been there 20 years. That was the case with me. Maybe the pastor's been there longer, or maybe they were there shorter. Maybe they were there 10, 15 years, but it was extremely popular.
Right.
And, and then that can be very difficult to follow up. And so, because the bar is so high for the next guy, right? And even if you went there 40 years, you might have been very popular. So talk a little bit about how a guy coming in that situation, and thankfully for you, you had pastored before, so it wasn't your first pastorate. But whether it's the first pastor or wherever, or a guy maybe he's just unprepared for some of the things that he might face with that.
Yeah, it's such a great question, and every situation is unique. There's no question about that. You definitely know, though, Dr. Lincoln is a legend. I mean, I love him. He was my pastor in college. He actually gave me my first opportunity in full-time ministry right after Meg and I got married. Before I started in seminary, I came on staff at Shandon for about a year before we went to seminary. And so I got to work with him, first job in ministry, which was such a gift. So I love Dr. Lincoln, and I'm so grateful for the legacy that was built under his leadership. Not only was he a great pastor and a great leader, but the church really did grow exponentially in his tenure. I mean, when he got here in the late 70s, the church was about 400 or so in average attendance. And then when he left, Shannon's a big church making a big dent in this city. So God did tremendous things under his leadership. And I would say, number one, the gift that I've had is that the relationship was in place, and we have sought to foster that friendship. He's come back, and I've had him preach multiple times in these first 3 years. We are in communication often. We have great conversations, meet and play golf and get together. And so there's been a real privilege there. And I know not everybody has that. Not every guy follows someone that's willing to engage in a friendship or has the opportunity to do that. And so I consider that a tremendous gift from the Lord. But I would also say one of the gifts that we often fail to see in following a longtime pastor is there is a stability in the life of a church when a pastor has been there for a long time. Yeah. And I've been able to receive that gift of stability. There's a firm foundation here at Shandon. And it actually goes beyond Dr. Lincoln. When I got to Shandon, the church was started in 1907. So, we're an older church, but there had only been 4 pastors. I'm the 4th pastor in the last 100 years.
Yeah, wow.
There were a couple guys that changed quickly in the early years, but over the last 100 years, I'm the 4th pastor. And so there's just this long story of faithfulness among the leadership here at Shandon. And so I want to honor that. I want to cherish that. I want to build upon that. And as changes are being made, and as we're trying to be more proactive in some things, or maybe different in some things, I just want to make sure, again, going back to language, that the things that I'm saying are honoring this tremendous gift of longevity and faithfulness that have been here. And I want to do everything I can to thank those who have been here far longer than me, and to thank those who have really blazed the trail that I now get to walk down as the pastor of Shandon. And so there's been plenty of challenges in that. When you follow a legend, there's the comparison thing. There's the we don't do it that way, And so what we tried to do in these first 3 years as it relates to that is we've tried to build the staff culture in such a way that, man, we love what's been done, but here's where we're going. And we're not talking bad about anything that's been done. We're just talking about where we're going and where we believe God is taking us. And so as the staff has become very forward focused in our vision, it really does permeate the life of the church. And so again, language is key, honor is key, but seeing the gift that longevity really has been in the life of our church, and then wanting to steward that well as it relates to my tenure here, I think has been very important for me.
Awesome. You mentioned a little bit about staff, and of course we've all read the leadership books, right? We've all read the leadership books out there, and some might be helpful, some might not. But I feel like experience is such a great teacher, at least in my own life. I feel like I have to experience it before I really get it a lot of times. And you went from a situation where it was a pretty good situation in Atlanta, and you had staff and everything, but then you came here and your staff probably increased exponentially. Sure. But even though they don't all directly report to you, you're responsible for a whole lot more people. So explain a little bit about to maybe a guy who's transitioning somehow, and there are men doing this kind of a similar transition that you made from this church where you had maybe a handful of staff people to now where you have a lot. Some just experience, wisdom you can give about how to not only manage that staff, even if they're not all directly reporting to you, but also prepare to preach the message every week, prepare to lead the vision, right? Because management can really get in the weeds sometimes if we're not careful. And a little bit about that.
It absolutely can, yeah. And I think, as it relates to how you spend your time as a senior pastor, it really does come down to identity and knowing who you are and how God's wired you, knowing where you really are strong and where you really are weak, and doing everything that you can to lead out of your strengths, and then have people around you who really can speak to and help you in your weaknesses. And so for me personally, I want a staff culture where we really are a team. And so we want to try to bring as many people as possible to the table to be involved. But that doesn't mean I can directly supervise them all. It doesn't mean I can spend a lot of time with them all, but we still want the voice at the table. And so we try to have a very good culture of what we call our all staff, where man, it's clear where we're going, it's clear what we're passionate about, it's clear what we're talking about, and then we empower our ministerial team to lead their specific charge in that effort. But one of our core values as a staff is the mission matters most. And so we want to remind our team over and over and over again that we are about one mission. And you may have a specific area of that mission that you're trying to carry out. You may have an objective that's unique in the specific area of ministry that you lead, but the mission is what matters most. And so we've got to all be walking together towards this mission. And so I love to empower my team. I don't get into the weeds. That's not where I'm strong, in the weeds. I love to be seeing up high and seeing where we feel like the Lord is taking us to go. And so I've got to have people around me that are great at providing supervision and great at pushing into the weeds and the details. And so that's the way we've built our team here. I've got a group of what we call our lead staff that I do spend weekly time with,
Yeah.
and I do invest in relationally. And then they are empowered to go and lead their specific area as it relates to the mission. And so we do staff stuff on Monday. Then I personally am going to do some staff follow-up stuff on Tuesday, and then also have different meetings in the life of the church. Wednesday is a day for me that is just kind of wide open for meetings. And about 2:00 on Wednesday, I get into the study and start really diving into the details of Sunday's message. And then Thursday, other than something like this that I choose to be involved with, that is totally, my decision on the Thursday, my assistant knows not to book anything at all for me on Thursday. And so I may have a meeting or two during that day, but it really is study and some advanced planning and just trying to look down the road at sermon series or different talks or different things that are coming. And so that's just how I have to try to balance that schedule. And then Friday, I do take a day totally away from the office. And it's a spiritual refreshment day. It's a Sabbath type day. And then we hit repeat the following week.
One thing I've learned that now, preaching every week for over 10 years now, and you're probably over that as well. You've probably been even longer than 10 years doing that. Scheduling your time really does help. And I was talking to Adam, Adam Williams recently, and he's, we had one of these episodes, and he's been out for about 2 years. And one of the things that, you hear about with sermon preparation is, man, it's going to take you 40 hours a week and 30 hours a week. And listen, George, it does not take me that long. And I don't feel like I'm sinning. I don't feel guilt if I don't spend that long doing it. And what I told Adam in the interview was, like any other skill, and yes, you're hearing from God and understanding, but any other skill, the more you do it, the better you do it, the quicker you can do it. Am I right on this? Right?
No, I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, hey, if I could spend 40 hours a week in preparation, that'd be amazing, but that would be the only thing I would do. I mean, good night. Or I think there's some guys that can do that if they're preaching, once every 8 weeks or something. They can spend a lot more time crafting a message. But when you're the primary communicator, and you're in a weekly rhythm, I don't see how you could spend.
Well, I don't see how, and I don't see like I said, again, I don't want to come across as like heretical in saying this, but it would be to maybe some preaching professors or something. But when you're involved in that, and you're going through series and you've prayed through them, and the text is there, and the more you know the Bible, the more you understand Scripture, the easier it is to connect those points. The easier it is, the more you know your people, to connect it to what the people need to hear, and it just seems to flow easier. And so, for those guys that are learning, I like to say, you get in a rhythm, like you said, and you know when it's ready, and the sermon's never ready, right?
Yeah.
It feels like sometimes, but I don't know where I was going.
I would say, Charlie, if you just are looking at the quote unquote study time that I put, so in the study, writing out a transcript, going over commentaries, doing the research, it's probably for me 8 to 10 hours a week per sermon. But that's a little deceptive because I plan in series and I
Yeah.
know where I'm going. And what I think for me takes the most time is the illustrations,
Me
the
too.
application, and just the takeaways. And so that probably, I would say the majority of the time, I don't know how, if I could put a percentage on, but the majority of the time, the application, the takeaway, the illustrations, those come to me when I'm not sitting in the study.
That's right.
And so that's all part of the preparation, but I may be grabbing an illustration on a Tuesday
Yeah.
for a message that's going to happen in 2 weeks. And I may be processing that, for a week before I flesh it out and put it down on some notes or in a transcript. And so there's actually a lot more preparation that's going on, but the actual study itself, where I'm just, trying to kind of grind it out on the research and the commentaries and making sure I'm exegeting this passage appropriately and accurately, that's probably 8 to 10 on average hours a week. That's how
That's the same for me, and that, I think that's what I was trying to get across is what people understand with pastors is they're writing that sermon 24/7, right?
right.
We're,
Yeah.
we're
This may
writing
not
it.
always have a pen or a keyboard in front of them, but you're
It's
right. Yeah.
constantly marinating, and it's all day kind of deal. And so then when you sit down to start writing it, it kind of flows out of all that, and
That's right.
so yeah, don't act like you need to 'cause I talked to a guy one time and he was saying, I have to have this time for this and this time for this. I'm like, well, I mean, that's a full-time job, just reading your commentaries. Anyway, that's good. Let's talk a little bit about, you grew up again in a pastor's family, and I believe you're the first pastor I've interviewed whose dad was like a senior lead pastor guy. I might be mistaken, but I think so. And let's say you have a pastor out there who has children and sons or maybe even daughters, and we know that ministry is a calling. We understand that, and you certainly could have children not called to ministry. We understand that's a possibility. But what if let's say there's a pastor who really would love to see their children go into some ministry opportunity, and if they're not in full-time ministry, at least be involved in the church ministry, right? And how can, since you grew up in it and now you have like 9 children like I do, right? It feels like I only have 4, but it feels like I have 9 sometimes, right? And you know
Yeah.
how that is. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Hey, 4 is I think all we can handle, but it's a ton.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot, right? Anyway, especially when they've been on summer break since March 15th.
That's
But
right.
talk a little bit about how you can foster that, where love for Jesus, love for the church, because
Yeah.
the children will, and you probably experienced it too as a child, they will pick up snippets of issues that you go through.
Oh, sure.
Inevitable, whether they're in their room listening to conversations they shouldn't listen to, like one of my children does all the time, so a little advice about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would start by saying I wholeheartedly agree with you that full-time gospel ministry is a calling of God. And I personally don't want my kids to be thinking about ministry unless God has called them to ministry.
Yeah.
But I want all of my kids, my desire for all 4 of my kids is that they love Jesus and love the church and are actively involved in the mission. And that really is ministry. Now, they may not get a paycheck to do it. And I do think it's a specific calling to be in vocational ministry. And personally, Charlie, I may not be the same as everybody. I really don't care if my kids are in vocational ministry or not. I want them to be actively involved in the mission because they love Jesus and they love the local church. And so I was given a great example as it relates to that through my parents. I just assumed as a kid that every preacher's kids loved the church, loved their dad, loved being involved, loved being a preacher's kid. I just assumed all preacher's kids loved that because I really did. And as I look back on it, the reason I did, I'm the oldest of 3 brothers. All 3 of my brothers love the church, love Jesus. All three of us, 2 brothers and myself, all have a great relationship with my parents. We just were all on vacation a week ago at the beach, and it's like the funnest week of the year. I mean, we just have a great time together. I would say my parents were so authentic in their love of Jesus. And we did not think that for my dad, being a preacher or being a Christian was a job. We looked at it and said, man, he loves Jesus. That's a privilege that he gets to be paid to do what he loves.
Yeah.
And so his faith was just so authentic. My mom's faith was so authentic, and my parents never put any pressure on us to make a decision to follow Christ. They put as much kindling on the fire or around the fireplace as they could, and then they trusted that the Lord was going to light that fire. And we all made the decision to follow Christ at a different age. And I remember when my calling first started to happen in college, and I began to process some of that with my dad. And he said, look, you need to know if God is calling you to ministry, he's going to make it clear. Mm-hmm. And if it's not clear, you need to go do something else until you know that he is calling you to full-time gospel ministry. Because my dad said the last thing we need are guys who go into the ministry and then bail out when it gets hard.
Good.
Or go into the ministry and think, I could be making more money over here doing that, so I'm going to go make more money. That doesn't help the individual. It doesn't help the church. It doesn't help anybody that sees that. I mean, that's so if you're going to pursue this with your life, you need to know that God has called you to this, because then when it is challenging, or when finances are tight, or when you are in a global pandemic and you think, gosh, I could be doing something else that's far less stressful right now, you don't bail out, because you know that calling of God is on your life. And so I just appreciate that example that my dad gave me, being authentic and then trusting that God is the one who calls.
Very good. And his advice sounds very similar to what Dr. Lincoln told me. When I told him, I came to him and said, I think the Lord's calling me into ministry. I don't know what that means. I didn't even feel the call to preach until I was already serving churches out of seminary. I just knew I was called to ministry, but I didn't even feel the call to preach until about 2010. And so, as a every week pastor kind of thing. But he told me, and you probably heard this before, but I visibly remember seeing this and hearing this. He said, if you can do anything else, do it.
Yeah, that's right.
If you could go be a sports journalist, if that's what you want to do it. If you want to do this, go do it. And if the Lord will let you do it, then do that, and don't go into ministry. And I think there's a lot of truth in that, because a calling, you can't escape it, right?
That's right.
And you just can't.
Well, and on the other side of this conversation, we need sports journalists who are following Jesus.
That's right.
Can impact the newsroom and can impact those that they work with. We need that. And so if that's what you're passionate about and that's what you feel called to, go do that, and go do it for the glory of God. That's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And so, yeah, I just think that advice is an incredible blessing. And I will say in our family, it actually even goes a little bit deeper, in that my grandfather is the greatest man of God that I ever knew. He's now in heaven with the Lord. I mean, just authentic, genuine Christian faith. He was in the business world, but his dad, my great grandfather, and then his dad, my great great grandfather, they were both full-time ministers.
Wow.
And so I remember my dad telling me when he felt called to ministry and went to his dad, who was this great Christian businessman, but who was the son of a preacher. Mm-hmm. My grandfather was so concerned for my dad, because my grandfather had seen so much of the hardship and the pain of ministry and what ministers walk through. And my grandfather could remember stories of ministers who would show up at his dad's doorstep just in tears, or just devastated, or just crushed by something that happened in ministry. And so my grandfather was really saying to my dad, you need to know this is a calling. You need to know that God has put this on your heart, because it's not going to be easy. And I think until you've walked those steps as a pastor in full-time gospel ministry, it's easy to romanticize it, where we think, man, that's a great gig. You just, people love you and they're so happy about everything you say, and you get to help people all the time, and you're revered. And hey, there are some tremendous blessings of being in full-time ministry.
Absolutely.
But it's a spiritual war. It is a battle. And there are so many challenges in ministry, and that calling has to be clear.
Very good. Yeah, there are tremendous blessings, benefits I don't want to use the word perks, but there is. I mean,
Sure.
for lack of a better word,
Yeah.
but there is the other side of the coin, and it's an ugly side. And like you said, the Spirit's not working in there, and if God's grace isn't getting us through, where would it be without God's grace, right?
And I just think too, Charlie, put a bow on it, man. The greatest gift we can give our kids is to encourage them to be who God's created them to be.
That's good.
And I think a lot of times for us in ministry, we know we live in a fishbowl. We know people are always watching. And so the tendency is if we're not really intentional, we start to push our kids to perform a certain way or be a certain way just because people are watching, instead of pushing our kids to be who God has created them to be for his glory. And, I mean, a lot of people have this image of what a pastor's family is supposed to look like and how pastors' kids are supposed to behave. And I'll tell you what I want for my kids is I want them to be who God has created them to be. And I hope it's different for all four of them because they're all very unique.
And they are absolutely right. And they probably are. If you're four like my four, I mean, there's things my son is completely different than me on. I mean,
Sure.
he spends every night playing the guitar. I wasn't doing that.
I know you weren't doing that.
Yeah, you absolutely right.
Please don't do that.
Yeah, that's right. And so that's very good because and one of my children really does not, I won't say who it is, but they struggle with being a ministry family. They struggle with the attention. And then another one loves it.
Yeah.
That could be a problem too down the road, right?
Oh man, absolutely. Yeah.
So we have to be careful. Very good. Awesome. All right. As we close up today, any advice for pastors going through this current COVID situation? And again, we know every church is different. Every culture is different. There's a lot of stuff coming at us from people who aren't pastors, other organizations, just, writing articles, trying to do what they do. I understand that.
Sure.
But again, in that chair, right, lead pastors are the only guys in that chair that really knows how to experience this. And me and you are one of the few people in history of the world that have led through a pandemic.
What a privilege.
Yeah, right. So just some advice on some pastors leading through it, going through the unknown.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. I would say a couple things. The first thing I would say is I really do feel like God has given us an opportunity to really evaluate what's most important and to lead our church and to lead the people that he's entrusted to us to what really is most important. And so one of the things that the pandemic has revealed as we've had to all adjust and do things very differently is there's some things that we were doing that probably we don't need to do again. And it's not that they were really, really bad. It's just they could have been frivolous or they could have been, not as effective as they used to be. And so I just think this is an opportunity internally in our churches with our teams where we need to be evaluating what really is most important so that as we come out of this, whenever that day is, and we get back to something that is somewhat of a semblance of what we were doing, we can say, we're not going to do that anymore because we see that this is going to be more effective, or we see that we can be better stewards in this area. And so I think just this time of evaluation, it's a gift from the Lord. And normally we're so busy that we don't stop and evaluate all this stuff. Right. And right now we've been given the chance to go, okay, are we really doing what matters most? And talk through those things. And I think, it gives us an opportunity to make some changes that maybe we wanted to change or needed to change, but we just didn't know how, or we were too busy to do, or we didn't know we needed to change. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And then I would say, Charlie, I think this is a season for us to be very open-handed. And as we lay out our plans, we say, look, we've prayed through this and we're seeking to walk in wisdom, but we recognize the plan may change. And we're going to just seek to honor God every step of the way. And we're being reminded that, man, each day is a gift and he really is sovereign and reigning over all. And so we're going to follow with open hands, perhaps in a way that we haven't followed in quite some time, because normally we can just be committed to our plan and we can do it the way we feel like we're supposed to do it. And right now we're all having to sit here before the Lord and say, we need you to show us what's best. And the last thing I'd say is it's great to be learning from as many people as possible right now, but we also need to be reminded that every local church, every local expression of the body of Christ is unique and is different. And so we have to make the call in wisdom with the leadership that has been entrusted to us for what is best for our local context and our local body that we get to be a part of. And so I think that's one of the challenges of this time is we're seeing what everybody else is doing and we're going, oh my gosh, maybe I should be doing that. Or maybe I have to follow what they just did. And yet every local congregation is in a very specific context and is inspired by the Holy Spirit and needs to do what God has laid on the hearts of the leadership for this time in this place.
Amen.
So I just, the comparison game in our culture is so tough. And I think right now in ministry, there is a temptation to just look around and see what other people are doing and go, I got to do that. Well, it may be different in their town. It may be different with their congregation. It may be different with their size or their scope or whatever. And so we want to learn, but we want to make sure we're doing what God has called us to do in our specific context.
Very good. Yeah. God holds us responsible for where we're at, not where you're at or somebody else.
And then can I say one more thing too? Because this has been on, unfortunately, full display in recent months. Man, I just would say to everybody in ministry right now, just be really, really cautious with the way you use social media. And if you're not putting stuff out there that's edifying to the body and encouraging and pointing to the good news of the gospel, you probably don't need to put it out there. And if you're on social media and you realize every time you get off, you're frustrated, maybe you should just stay off for a while. I mean, really, just stay off. Like you don't have to be there. You're not required to be on social media all the time. So I would just say use caution, use wisdom, and seek to be edifying and gospel-centered as it relates to social media.
That's awesome. Very good. Because everybody's on there because there's nothing to do.
That's right.
Very good. All right. Listen, one prayer request before we leave. College football season. We need that, right?
Oh man. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well,
but we all know the SEC is the Lord's conference, and so there's a pretty good chance they're going to have football no matter what everybody else does.
And that's right. And I'm sure there'll be no positive tests throughout the entire conference.
That's right. That's exactly right.
That's good. All right, George. If you're in Columbia, George Wright, Shandon Baptist Church, there on Forest Drive, 5250 Forest Drive, right? Is that right?
Man, yeah, good memory.
All right, man. Good to see you.
Hey, thank you, Charlie.